Thanks, Young, and welcome everybody. My name's Cameron. I'm a member of Cocaine Anonymous, and I've been asked to speak on step one, which is, a real foundation step for all of us, because without that foundation in place, it's hard to be motivated to work the other 11 steps. So tonight's talk is about how to effectively share a war story. We've all heard war stories in the rooms, and all the crazy things we do, but how do we share a war story in such a way that we can effectively connect with those that suffer in the rooms? I believe every member has a story, and it's an important story that needs to be shared in the rooms, because somewhere in the rooms there's an ear that desperately needs to hear your story. And that could be the message that gets that suffering addict onto the path of recovery and working our wonderful program, 12 Steps of Cocaine Anonymous. So in this presentation, I hope that some of my self-revealing accounts won't be taken in bad taste. It's my hope that any addicted man or woman desperately in need will see this presentation and think that, by fully disclosing myself and the things that I face, I'm hoping that we can come to a conclusion where we realize, hey, I'm like you, and you're like me, but one of us doesn't do it anymore, and I want what you got. That's really what we're trying to do in that important relationship between the sponsor and the sponsee. Three things have to come into play to create that situation. One, we're ex-problem addicts. When you think about that, when you realize you meet people in these rooms who don't drink or use anymore, that's pretty compelling to someone who wants to stop but can't. Two, we have a solution, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And three, we're armed with the facts about ourselves. And when we bring those three elements together, we can win the entire confidence of that newcomer, and they realize, I'm one of you guys. I want what you have, right? And we get them on that all-important journey. So step one says we're powerless over cocaine and all other mind-altering substances. Our lives have become unmanageable. The question is, what does that mean? What does it mean to be powerless? What does it mean to be unmanageable? How do you know I'm powerless? How do you know my life's been unmanageable? How do I know you're powerless? How do I know your life is unmanageable? And so the question is how to share the story in a way that we're able to resonate with the newcomer and when they're confident. Now, I love the Big Book of AA because it's very specific on how we share. And in this process, I'll also qualify with you as an addict, just so you don't think I wandered in from some donut shop that has Wi-Fi and I'm lonely and I need a chance to share with some people. Our Big Book says, our message has to have depth and weight if we're going to hold the interest of an addict. It goes on to say we're going to talk about habits, symptoms, and experiences, encourage the newcomer to speak of themselves. We're going to share how baffled we were, how we finally learned there's something different about us. We don't drink and use like other people for some strange reason. Give them an account of the struggles we made to stop. And then lastly, how that mental twist in our minds, that strange phenomenon that parallels our sound reasoning, fails to hold us in check, which always leads to that first drink or first drug of a spree. So there's a passage in the doctor's opinion that I use over here in Canada. I don't know whether it happens over there a lot in the meetings of CA in the UK, but over here, when you chair a meeting, you have to qualify. You have to say something that qualifies you to sit in that chair and chair the meeting, or to if you're in charge of running that particular meeting. So there's a passage in the doctor's opinion, and I think it's a very apt description of what the addiction pattern looks like and what we are as alcoholic addicts. It says men and women drink, use essentially because they like the effect. Do you like the effect of drugs and booze? I love the effect. I love it more than every job I've been fired from. I love it more than my children. I was a needle user. I used to share dirty needles. I'd leave my tools laying about because I'm irresponsible. And, when my children were little ones, they'd be playing squirt guns with my dirty fits. And that's an awful thing to witness, but it didn't have the power to sober me up. I like the effect of booze and drugs more than that. My wife would beg, plead, offer those frothy emotional appeals, threaten me with divorce, but I liked the effect more than my own marriage. I like it so much that I'm willing to risk my life. Think about what you were willing when you were out there in your spree, what you were willing to risk to get that amazing effect we get when we drink or use. And in the year 2000, my doctor diagnosed me with liver disease and said, Cameron, you're going to die if you don't stop drinking. And the first thought that crossed my mind was, I need a drink right now. And drank for 3 more years on that news. Now, I always say the muggles. I call the normies or the earth people muggles. That's a Harry Potter term for non-wizard. The muggles don't understand the addict whatsoever. My wife's what I call a JDD girl. Just don't drink, Cameron. Which is really the answer, but I can't seem to implement that. Somehow, some way, I always drink or use. And it's baffling because I'm burning my life to the ground, but like a dog that returns to its own vomit. You ever seen a dog eat something that makes it foully sick? It throws it up. And then what does the dog do? It eats the vomit, only to throw it back up again. That's what I'm like as an untreated addict. I'm like a dog that returns to my own vomit. I know it's going to make me sick, but somehow, some way, I keep returning to it. And it's baffling. And even so, this description goes on to say that the sensation is so elusive that while we admit what we're doing is injurious to our health, we can't seem to figure it out. We can't seem to differentiate the true from the false. And it's because I got this liar that lives in my head. And the liar loves the effect produced by alcohol and drugs and doesn't under any circumstance want to give it up. So what it's done is it's built this research institute in my brain called Bullshit Inc., and it is researching new ideas and new excuses and new justifications and reasons that even though my life is burned to the ground, this time when I do it, somehow, some way, I'm going to be able to control and enjoy it. You all relate to the liar that lives in our head, right? And here's the problem. The liar would always win the argument. Always. I could not defend against the liar. Now, as an untreated addict, I am generally restless, irritable, discontented. I like to add to this list. I'm bored, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, and I don't like feeling that way. So I seek a solution. My solution is to drink and use. See, drinking and using is not my problem. It's my solution. Running out is a problem. But in the beginning, it was my solution. Remember when we first started drinking or using? Go back to that experience. Remember when you first tried it and that feeling came over and you went, yeah, this is the way I want to be. And it seems like the answer. But as the illness rolls out, as it progresses, it starts to take on a much different pattern. What used to be a luxury of take it or leave it alone now became an absolute necessity. And when I would drink or use, I'd like to tell you I'm just going to go to the pub, have a pint and a few shots of bourbon and come home. But I really can't predict that outcome. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. It could last an evening. It could last a day. It could go on for a week. It could last a month or go on for a year or more. I don't know. And I get that phenomenon craving where I'm out on the spree wanting more and more and more and more, and I can't seem to stop it. Eventually, there's that moment of clarity where I emerge and I'm full of horror and remorse and hopelessness, and I make a firm resolution not to do it again. And we've all done that coming off one of our runs, right? Never again. This is it. This is the last time. And here's the rub. If we were to be hooked up to lie detector tests, I'm pretty much convinced it would register as truthful for all of us. But what happens? We realize we can't live with the booze and drugs anymore, but I don't know how to live without them. And so I come to the rooms because I hear, go to meetings, meeting makers make it, 90 and 90. And I go into these rooms, and a lot of the rooms don't really have a solution. It's just, let's go to a meeting and share. And share, usually what is sharing our problems. And I enter into what I call sobriety, where I know I can't live with it, but I'm not being offered a real solution. So I sit there and I dry out. And as I dry out, I get restless and irritable and discontented and bored. And then the liar comes out of remission and says, hey, screw this. We need our solution. It starts working on a reason why I should pick up. And the liar always wins the argument. and I succumb to the desire again, and I go out on another spree, followed by more remorse, followed by another resolution. And I go around that wheel of misfortune, spree, remorse, resolution, spree, remorse, resolution, pursuing my love of drinking and using to the gates of insanity or death. Now raise your hand if you know someone who's died from addiction, right? Most of us, if not all of us on this channel, knows at least one person that has died. If you've got it, it's a death sentence. In 18 years of working with others, now I drank and used from the age of 20 to 46, morning, noon, and night, and then entered into sobriety. And for the last 18 years of working with others, I keep track of everyone I've carried a message to, and it's a little over 5,000 to date. And out of that mix, I've been fired about 2,000 times as a sponsor, worst sponsor ever. I've seen about 2,000 miracles, and I've buried 40. 40 are dead. And I bury most people to alcohol deaths. Alcohol is still the most dangerous drug out there. Kill you when you drink it, kill you when you detox from it. Benzos are bad too. Clonazepam, diazepam, pyrazepam, they're nasty substances. Here in Canada, fentanyl is very popular. Fentanyl is number 2 in terms of death. But what's interesting about the number of people that I've buried, that I've worked with directly, is 9 of them took their own lives. They hung themselves in sobriety. Now, why would someone hang themselves in the rooms of 12-step? When a solution isn't available, and here's what I see in a lot of the rooms. First of all, the suicide rates in 12 steps is 80 times higher than normal society. It's in the Oxford Handbook to Psychiatry. An untreated addict is 80 times more likely to commit suicide in the first 5 years of their sobriety. Untreated. That's why giving the solution, sharing our stories and winning the confidence of the newcomer and getting them on this solution we call the 12 Steps of Cocaine Anonymous are so important, because there's a real likelihood that they're either going to go insane and take their own lives or relapse and go out and die that way. And it's a real problem in the room. And this is the horror of step 1. It's the realization I can't stop. Anything secular, anything human doesn't work for me. I will drink and use again. And for me to drink and use again is to pursue that spree to the gates of insanity or death. And that's an awful conclusion on step 1. Yet as a member of Cocaine Anonymous for 18 years, I've been able to easily control my desire to drink or use. I'm an alcoholic addict who doesn't drink or use. That's a paradoxical statement, because everything in my experience tells me I will, and yet I don't. How is that possible? And it was when I came into these rooms, I met a man who was armed with the facts about himself. He had a solution and a generosity of spirit as an ex-problem addict, and showed me a way out of that inescapable hole. And using the principles of our program, I've been able to rebuild a destroyed life. My wife and I are celebrating 31 years of marriage, and she's my best friend, my confidant, my soulmate, my business partner. I have the love and trust of my children, who are 35 and 37. My daughter's actually coming over today for dinner. I always look forward to Thursday nights with my daughter, and we were estranged for many years because of my rancorous behavior while drinking and using. My son's 37. He has a 10-year-old autistic boy, severely autistic, and to be sober and supportive and helpful in my son's family, and that's a gift CA gives me day in and day out. My liver went back to normal after 6 years. I went back to university. I was talking to someone before the meeting started. You know, there's 3 good predictors of recovery. 1, we work with others. 2, we go back to school, improve ourselves, improve our lot in life. And the 3rd thing is we fix our teeth, right? I see those 3 things in recovery. I know that person's got a good program going. So if you really want to accelerate it, go back and take dental school. So I went back to university. I always wanted to do university, but drugs and alcohol seemed a much more interesting research project in my 20s. But I graduated in 2016 at the age of 59 in medical anthropology and religion at the top of my class at the 18th ranked Ivy League university in the world, University of Toronto. I've been involved. It's a stellar life being a member of Cocaine Anonymous, and that's why I like to designate myself a member of this wonderful program as opposed to being an addict, because I think there's a big difference between being a member of CA and being an untreated addict. And I've started many groups. I've been GSR, I've been treasurer, I've been secretary, I've served on 9 local conventions at the area level, done most of the positions at area. I'm currently the Southern Ontario archivist. I'm the online service area. I'm one of 3 delegates, and I'm also the World Archive Chair for CA out of LA. And it is a great life living the program of Cocaine Anonymous. I've been all over the world prior to COVID. Been to Sweden, across Spain, England, United States, Canada. Man, like, it is just a great, great life being a member of this program. And it was all predicated on being motivated to find a solution on step 1. So there's a what I try to do is there's a passage in Working with Others that says, remember, the more hopeless the newcomer feels, the better. They'll be more likely to follow our suggestions. So this comes back to how do we tell our war story. Now, I use an analogy that as addicts, we're men and women who are drowning, and we know we're drowning, and we're desperate for some kind of power to keep our heads above water. So we look around, we see a log floating on the surface, and I think I'll swim to the log. The log will keep my head above water. I can stay buoyant. But when I reach the log, if you ever tried picking up a log that's been in the water a long time, it's slimy, it's slippery, it's hard to hold on to. So as a power, it might keep my head above water a day, a week, a month, maybe a year or more, but at some point the log fails me as a power and I slip and drown. Logs are best described as easier, softer ways, middle-of-the-road solutions, half measures, and human aids. So what I've done is I've created what I call a log list, and I'll share the link in the chat after the presentation. If you like this approach as a tool, please download it. It's great for sponsors, for qualifying the newcomer and helping them, arm them with the facts about themselves. And as newcomers, it really crystallizes whether or not we belong here, whether or not we're really powerless and unmanageable. So as I said, how do we share a story that we can identify? Hey, I'm like you, you're like me, but the difference is you don't do it anymore and I want what you got. Now, I'm a needle user. Now, if I'm working with a marijuana addict and I start talking about shooting up, is that person going to be able to identify? They're going to look at me like I got 3 heads on, right? I've heard people share that they've prostituted themselves, they've lived on the streets, they've been in and out of jail. I've never had that experience as an addict. So then my liar's disc comes into play and says, that's not you, Cameron. Maybe you're not an addict. So there's a disconnect with that kind of identification. Even in drinking, I'm an everyday bourbon drinker. But I know people that are wine drinkers, beer-only drinkers. I know people that are weekend binge drinkers. I know blackout drunks who smoke crack cocaine. Not because they're crack cocaine addicts, but they smoke crack cocaine so they can drink longer. Right? So behavior patterns vary within even the addiction itself. So how do we identify with such a myriad of different behavioral patterns? So I use a log list. I look at remember, the instruction in the book says, we discuss the failed strategies. We share all the reasons, all the ways we tried to stop, but they failed us. So the first one to go is always willpower, right? We all try to muster up the willpower, that firm resolution, that oath, that promise, but it fails to hold us in check. And that's usually the first log we burn. Controlled using was another log that I burned. I'm just here for a gram. My dealer would laugh when I'd say that, because I'd be back very shortly thereafter for another gram and another gram. Harm reduction is very big in Canada. I said, harm reduction, sign me up. I just won't do as much. But once I start, I can't predict it. So harm reduction was another log for me. Ill health. My doctor warning of a doctor failed to hold me in check. And the warning of lawyers, employers, the judge, they failed to hold me in check. Ominous warnings. Change of environment. I moved from Burlington, or moved from Toronto, where I was very badly addicted, to my old hometown, Burlington, to get away from it all. And I was very disappointed to find out that my old hometown not only had bars, but it had drug dealers too. I think I stayed sober a week. Triggerless. I'm a wakened baker. I like to wake up, smoke a big fat doob, double espresso cappuccino. Just waking up is a trigger. How the hell am I going to avoid triggers, right? Counseling, therapy. I did 10 years of Gestalt therapy. It was great, good work, but it never kept me sober. Detox, treatment centers. How many here have been to treatment more than twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times? I bet people have been to treatment 15 times. And I found them to be logs. I meet a lot of people, while they're in treatment, they stay sober, but the very day they get out, they're high again. I used to do spiritual retreats. The detox felt great during the retreat, and then after I got out, I thought I had the resolve, but then the memory faded, and I went back to using again. War stories, fear, horror, right? We've all heard war stories in the room. Hell, my own war story doesn't keep me sober. Do you think your war story is going to work? Or the horror, or the fear? I have a lot of fun with newcomers. I always tell them, chances are you're not going to do it. You're too dishonest, too selfish, too self-seeking to do the work, and you're going to die. And then I'm going to come to your funeral, and I'm going to have free sandwiches there. And then I'm going to have sex with your wife. And they get right wound up, right? But it's a log like anything else, right? It's lots of fun to say, though. Although lately everybody's so young, I can't use the wife. I go, I'm going to have sex with your mother, which doesn't seem to work out well either. One guy in AA goes, whoa, Cameron, you haven't seen my wife. I couldn't stop laughing to that response. But it's a log, right? Relationships. How many of us tried to sober up for our families, our spouses, our children? Right? They're logs like everything else. I love my wife and children, but they never had the power to sober me up. Church and prayer, faith without works log. Having a sponsor or a mentor or a life coach, right? All these things seem to fail to hold me in check. 90 and 90, meeting makers make it. These open, disgusting meetings where there's no solution, no cross-sharing or cross-talk, where it's like an incessant Oprah wine fest of problem, group therapy without a therapist. By the end of the meeting, I'm a psychological casualty. There's been no hope, no faith, no courage, and now I need a meeting to fix the meeting. How can anyone do 90 and 90 of that kind of stuff? Oh, my God. Self-help books, studying the big book. I know people that know their big books inside and out, and they still can't bake a recovery recipe. Intelligence. I've worked with people with PhDs, hopelessly fucked on heroin or fentanyl or crack. Frothy emotional appeals, ultimatums. Positive thinking. Some people go, oh, Cameron, you're so negative. I need someone who can be positive. I go, I can be positive. They go, really? Yeah, I'm positive you're going to relapse. Here in Canada, we read poetry in the rooms. Poetry. Yesterday's a day. It's called Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. Yesterday's the day that's already happened. You can't do anything about it. Tomorrow's not here, so don't worry. But there is one day, today. Any one of us can fight the battles of just one day. And I always go, yeah, but not on payday. I can never fight the battle on payday. Guilt, shame, remorse, good days, bad days. When's the best day to get high? Every day. Having money, no money, memory strategies, think, play the tape all the way through, remember when, but when do we always remember when? After the fact. Why? Because the liars run in my brain without a solution, and I got no defense. Those strategies don't work. Good reasons to stop, philosophical, moral convictions didn't work, suffering, humiliation, sobriety time, there's a huge log in the program. And the list goes on and on. Now, here's what happens when I do a log list. I share my logs that I burned with the newcomer. The newcomers share their logs with me. And 2 things happen. As the sponsor, I get a very clear idea how powerless my newcomer is. And for the newcomer, it starts to crystallize in their mind just how powerless they are. And all these secular human aids are not going to keep them sober. And that's very worrisome to someone who wants to stop but can't stop. The other thing about a log list, it's universal. I'm an alcoholic addict, drug addict, but I've worked with sex addicts, food addicts, cutters, hoarders, gamblers. And you know what I have found? All addicts, regardless of the addiction, they all burn the same logs. And so when I use logs, the failed strategies I used to make to stop that failed to hold me in check, I get a much clearer identification. They realize, hey, I'm just like you. I've burned all the same logs you have. You're just like me. You burned all the same logs I've burned. But you don't do it anymore. I want what you got. Now, unfortunately, the log list is not what brought me into the program. People would say, Cameron, are you an addict? I go, you're fucking right, I'm an addict. Let's go get high. It was the second part of step one that drove me into the rooms, and that's the unmanageability. Now, when I came into AA first, and this guy approached me, he said, Cameron, are you fucked? And I thought, what a rude question. You don't say that in AA. You don't cuss and swear and say nasty things. But I was at that point where I was fucked, and I said, I'm fucked. He says, that's good. I can work with that. But when I came into the rooms of CA, and I'd ask the newcomer, so tell me, are you fucked? They'd look at me and go, fucked? Let me tell you how fucked up I am, Cameron. And then all this bravado and all this junky pride would come out about what badasses they were. So how do I cut through that ego? So I changed tactics. I now ask the newcomer, tell me, are you a fucking loser? Oh, they hate that. My wife called me a loser. My counselor says I suffer from low self-esteem. Why would you say that? Hey, I'm not here to be mean about it. I'm trying to wake you up that based on your log list, you're going to probably use again. And to use again puts me on a losing strategy, a losing trajectory to the gates of insanity or death. So let's look at the record. What have you lost as a result of your addiction? And I go through a loser list to signify unmanageability. Time, family, spouse, children, friends, your money, your home, your residence, health, safety, hygiene, opportunities, your license, your career, education, quality of life, self-respect, respect from others, emotional security, responsibility, your reputation, your freedom, your morality, your spirituality, peace of mind, your sanity, your faith, your humanity. And we go through this list checking them off. Now, I checked all of these off. And they're checking them off. So at the end of the presentation, so I ask you again, are you a loser? And they go, when you put it like that, Cameron, yeah, I am. Here's what I learned about a loser list. It tells me two things. As a sponsor, it tells me how grave your situation is. It tells me how close you are to the gates of insanity or death. And for the newcomer, it really crystallizes for them how close to the gates of insanity or death they are. And it raises that motivation. I want what you got. You're just like me, but you don't do it anymore. Please show me how to work it. And one last thing about the loser list, it's universal. All addicts, regardless of the addiction, all lose the same things. They all pursue their addiction to the gates of insanity or death. So using this approach of a log and loser list, I'm able to win the entire confidence of another addict in a few hours. And I've literally summarized the first 43 pages of the big book, including the doctor's opinion, in a page of discussion with the newcomer. Lack of power, that's our dilemma. How soon should we get the newcomer tapped into the power? Well, if you be an addict of the seemingly hopeless variety, we should get them hooked up as quickly as possible. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on step one. I just want to arm the newcomer with the facts about themselves, so that they can understand why they are the way they are and get them onto that more important journey, which is a solution. And now they can admit, yeah, based on this, I am an addict. Now, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is we're without defense because the liar always wins and I will pick up and use again. The good news is there is a solution, right? Now, if you're as seriously addicted as we were, and we're in a position where life is becoming impossible, and then I use their log and loser list like an MO, like a rap sheet, based on your loser list, is life becoming impossible? And they go, yeah, it is. And then have you passed into a region from which there is no return through human aid? Based on your log list, are you beyond human aid? They go, yeah, I am. And now we start to get some traction here. And we give them that good news. Well, there is a way out. And I love this line, and I'll conclude with this, is that strange as it may seem to those who do not understand, once the psychic change has occurred, that very same person who seemed doomed, who seemed such a loser and had so many problems they ever despaired of solving them, suddenly finds themselves easily able to control their desire to drink, to use, or if you suffer from the acting out, addictions acting out. And the only thing necessary is to follow a few simple rules, to follow the recipe of our 12 steps. So if you decided you want what we have, what do? We have recovery from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and are willing to go to any length to get it. What do we mean by any length? To follow the instructions in the big book of AA. Then you're ready to take certain steps. And if they, and then now that we got them at that point, we can lay out that spiritual kit of tools at their feet and get them on their way into that 12-step program so that they too can recover and pass this all-important message on to another newcomer who will then in turn pass it on to another newcomer. And man, that's an experience you don't want to miss out on, and I'm for that. How about you? Thank you so much. I hope you found that a useful presentation.